Petr Yan is taking on Merab this weekend, and Yan is 100% going to win this, right? Well, not exactly. So if you don't know who Petr Yan is an absolute beast in the UFC. He was the bantamweight champion only a year and a half ago, and he is an absolute killer. This guy has crisp boxing, really good timing, and he has really good fight IQ. He's the type of fighter to take his time, learn his opponent, and outstrike his opponent, use good defensive wrestling as well. He's a very, very well-rounded fighter, so I bet you're wondering, how the hell is Merab going to beat him? And here's why. Is Petr Yan as good as we all think he is, myself included? And you have to start to question it, right? Because if you go look at his last fights, we can all agree he's looked a lot more beatable in them, whether or not he's lost, and he has lost most of them, than we ever thought he would. So I'm not even going to get into the Sean O'Malley and Petr Yan one. You could argue Petr Yan won that fight, but he shouldn't have even let it be that close if we're being honest. We all look to Petr Yan as this unbeatable, potentially the GOAT at bantamweight type of fighter, and he goes in and he has a war back and forth with Sean. I'm not discrediting Sean. Sean's amazing, but well-rounded, good fighters should be able to beat the excellent striker, right? It should have been a matchup that he could have won, and he still had it so close to the point where he lost it. His fight against Sandhagen, he did win that fight, but again, if you remember watching the fight, I watched it live, I didn't know who's going to win that fight up until the 4th round, you know what I mean? Like, that was a back and forward war. Petr Yan, yet again, looked beatable in that fight, and then you take it even a step further, you go look at his last fight before that. Aljo used his footwork and his grappling in that fight to beat Yan, and that was another one where Yan was looked at to pretty much dominate Aljo. It was almost a foregone conclusion in the lead up, myself included. I thought Yan was going to dominate him, and the point I'm getting at is Yan is not unbeatable. Not only that, is he looked more beatable than we've ever seen him really in his last few fights, and now I know he can totally bounce back. He's a great fighter, and I still think he has a lot left to give in the tank. He's still fairly young, he's not old, but go look on the side of Merab now, right? Again, I always say, take away the names, take away the storyline. Let's look at the styles of these two fighters and what they've proven recently in the octagon, their last 3 fights. You have Merab. He's a relentless wrestler who will not stop coming at you to try to take you down. Essentially a leg humper, you know, he's not going to go and submit you. He's going to take you down, land just enough to rack up the strike totals, to score with the judges, but he's not trying to do crazy submissions and lose the position. He's a very calculated type of guy. So when you have that type of guy and you look at the type of fighters he's used to fighting good strikers or well-rounded guys with good striking. If you go look at his last 3 fights, that's who each of them were. You have Jose Aldo, who had incredible wrestling takedown defense his entire career. He was actually known for it. He's a good striker. I know he lost to Yan and he is getting up there in age. However, how did he win that fight? He pushed Jose against the cage pretty much and just used clinch work and landed enough strikes to win the round. At the end of the day, whether we like it or not, that is kind of how you can win a UFC fight, right? We've seen it before, so maybe that's just one case. Well, you go look again, one step further, his fight against Marlon Moraes. Marlon Moraes now isn't really impressive, but at that time he was a killer. This was a few years ago, and a lot of people in the bantamweight division did not want to fight Marlon. He has some crazy KOs. He KO'd Aljo, the current champion. You know, like, Marlon's a legit guy, especially at that time. And if you remember watching that fight, it was actually probably the most entertaining Merab fight because we almost got to see him lose. He almost got KO'd, showed heart, survived. Was like, I would have argued they could have stopped that fight, right? It was absolutely not looking good for our boy Merab, but then he comes back with wrestling, with persistence, gets on top, and just starts landing ground and pound. He's not even doing devastating, huge, separate space ground and pound, which is where the opponent would have a good chance of getting up, right? He just lays on you in elbows, hammer fists. He's that type of guy. So what I'm saying is, and what I'm trying to point out here, those two things in those 2 fights don't necessarily mean that Merab will be able to do this against Yan, but Merab is most used to fighting that type of fight. Now let's go look at Yan's record. How many times has he fought the dominant wrestler who will not fucking stop when he's coming after you and will mix in some little bit of crazy striking to confuse you? Almost no one. The closest match I can think of is Aljo, and he lost that fight in his last one. He was winning the first one, but that's like 2 or 3 years ago at this point, and once you lose your unbeaten streak, we've seen it before. Some people can crack a little bit mentally, and I'm not saying that will happen with Petr Yan, but what I am saying is if you look historically at who he's fought, Merab is a way different matchup than he is used to his whole career, versus Merab is used to a much more similar matchup to Yan than Yan is. So I want to take this a step further. How do I visualize this fight going? It's essentially like a bull and matador situation. Yan does not want to engage in clinching or engage in getting taken down by Merab, and that's all Merab wants to do. So any striking in the middle is essentially a game of tug of war. Merab wants to get here, Petr wants to keep him here. You know what I mean? So as you're watching the fight, it's a 5-round fight, you got to ask yourself, over the course of 5 minutes each round, I bet you Merab will probably be able to get to him a couple times, right? Will he take him down every time? No. Will he get to him easily? No. Unless he gets knocked out or severely hurt with Yan, which is possible. Yan has power in his hands, good boxing. He will get to him. And the way way these judges score these fights is it's supposed to be damage overall, right? But how many times have we seen a guy light someone up pretty good on the feet, bust him up, cause a bunch of damage, but then he gets taken down with like 2 minutes left on the clock. The other guy's laying on him, elbows, hammer fist. Almost always it'll go to the guy who ended the round strongly, and that usually favors the grappler, because once they get you, unless they make a mistake or, you know, they're not that type of grappler, it's pretty damn hard to get back up. And I think Peter will be able to get back up a couple times, but the whole wrestling cardio is a lot different than striking cardio. And I know Peter has historically had good wrestling defense, like I said, but the biggest counter to that I want to say is he's never really fought a relentless wrestler like Merab. So can Peter win? Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to see. I'm looking forward to it, but I do think Merab's going to take this one. I think there's a little bit of a rise of a tide, a little falling in the other area. I think Merab's style is just sort of the perfect matchup, and I think he's had more similar Peter-like tests thrown at him in past than Peter has had Merab-like tests. So he's more prepared for this type of fight, and I think Merab's going to get this one done. He's an absolute big underdog on this fight. I wouldn't bet it heavy. I could see Peter winning, but if you do want to, he's got some pretty enticing odds, and he's absolutely live in this fight. And I could very well see this being one of those ones where after the fight goes on, people are very upset, myself included, because now we have, you know, a leg humper essentially almost ready to contend for the title. So I don't want to see that happen. It'll be interesting because he's good friends with Aljo. I wonder how that would go, but I know Aljo wants to move up to 145 pounds anyway, so I imagine that's what they would do. But that's what I'm thinking for this fight, guys. If you guys like my breakdown, you like my style of content, make sure you guys drop a like, drop a comment. I bet you a ton of you disagree with what I said, so I want to argue with you. Let's have a little bit of a debate. Let me know in the comments what you think of my points. I reply to every comment, and I appreciate all you guys for watching. So we'll see you on Friday in the Before You Bet series, where I go through my favorite parlays, favorite underdogs, favorite locks for this card. I know a lot of you guys really enjoyed my last one of those. It was best received video I did that week, so definitely going to make that a weekly thing. That's it for this one. Looking forward to this fight card. It's actually pretty good this week. Don't sleep on it, and I will see you in the next one.